We were all told the Titanic was the unsinkable ship that met a tragic end after hitting an iceberg. But what if that wasn't the truth? What if the ship that sank wasn't even the Titanic? Because the deeper you dig, the more this starts to look less like a tragic accident and more like a pre-planned switcheroo with deadly consequences. Let's start with what they don't put in your fifth grade history book. The Titanic wasn't one of a kind. She had a twin, almost identical in every way. And that twin may be the key to unraveling this entire mystery. The RMS Olympic was the first of the White Star Line's new Olympic-class luxury liners. She launched in 1910, majestic, massive, and modern. Then came her younger sister, the RMS Titanic, in 1912, nearly a carbon copy with only minor interior upgrades. From a distance, you couldn't tell them apart. And from up close, well, if you swapped a few plates and paint jobs, neither could anyone else. But here's where things take a turn. In September of 1911, the Olympic collided with a Royal Navy warship, the HMS Hawke off the Isle of Wight. The damage was devastating: bent steel, twisted hull plating, and a warped keel. Not only that, but insurance refused to cover the damages. The Olympic was a financial black hole, and that put White Star Line and its puppet master financier, J.P. Morgan, in a tight spot. They had two nearly identical ships. One was brand new, fully insured, and scheduled for a glamorous maiden voyage. The other was heavily damaged, uninsurable, and useless unless someone pulled a fast one. So the theory goes, they quietly switched the ships. The Olympic was patched up just enough to sail. Meanwhile, the Titanic, never officially completed, took her place in the dry dock. Her nameplate swapped, her interiors adjusted to match the Olympic's public profile. By March 1912, the Titanic was ready to launch. But was it really her? Or was it her battered sister in disguise? These weren't conspiracy theorists spotting UFOs. These were shipbuilders, naval historians, even former crew members who said, "That wreck on the ocean floor? That wasn't the Titanic I knew." And you know what? They might be right. In every good heist, timing is everything. But in this one, so is the guest list. Let's talk about who was supposed to be on the Titanic and who suspiciously wasn't. First up, J.P. Morgan. He was the financial puppet master behind the White Star Line. Titanic was basically his ship. He had a luxurious suite booked for the maiden voyage, but at the last minute, he bailed. His excuse? "I'm staying in France for health reasons." Really? Because photographs surfaced showing Morgan shopping in France with his mistress, perfectly healthy. Morgan wasn't the only one who backed out. A whole lineup of industrial elites, politicians, and business moguls suddenly canceled their trips on the world's most hyped ocean voyage. It's like they knew something was about to go down. Now let's talk about the men who did board. Men who just so happened to stand in the way of Morgan's grand plans to create a central bank. Benjamin Guggenheim, mining mogul. Isidor Straus, co-owner of Macy's and a powerful political donor. Colonel John Jacob Astor IV, the richest man on the ship and one of the wealthiest in the world. All three were vocal opponents of the creation of the Federal Reserve, a scheme that Morgan had been orchestrating behind the scenes for years. They were inconveniently powerful, wildly influential, and not afraid to fight the banking elite. And they all died. Let me paint the picture. Morgan's enemies, dead. His ship, sunk. The public, distracted by grief. And just 1 year later, 1913, the Federal Reserve Act passes quietly into law. Coincidence? You tell me. All right, let's go deep, literally, because the so-called Titanic lying on the ocean floor, it's telling a different story than the textbooks do. The shipwreck discovered by Robert Ballard in 1985 was celebrated worldwide, but right away questions started popping up, not from wild-eyed conspiracy theorists, but from naval engineers, maritime historians, and even Titanic survivors. Here's what they noticed. 1. Porthole placement. The Titanic had 14 evenly spaced portholes on one section of her hull. The Olympic had 16 with a different pattern. Guess what the wreck shows? 16 portholes. Olympic's layout, not Titanic's. The nameplates. Every major ship has its name engraved in massive, massive brass plates. On the wreck, gone, missing, ripped off. But rivets and hull numbers? That's where it gets even stranger. The Titanic was assigned yard number 401. The Olympic was 400. Several recovered pieces, doors, panels, bulkheads, were stamped 400. Olympic's number. You mean to tell me the Titanic's wreckage is full of Olympic-marked parts? That's not just sloppy construction, that's intentional identity theft. 3. Structural damage and design differences. Engineers have pointed out that the structural failure of the ship, the way it split in half and sank, better fits the Olympic's older, damaged frame than the freshly built Titanic. Remember, the Olympic suffered keel and hull damage in her collision with the HMS Hawke. If she were pushed out to sea in rough Atlantic waters, weakened from that impact, of course she'd break in two, not because of an iceberg, but because she was already on life support. So what's the theory here? The ship that hit the iceberg, if it even did, wasn't Titanic. It was the Olympic, wearing Titanic's dress. The real Titanic? She stayed safely in the shipyard, probably renamed, refitted, and repurposed for years, maybe even scrapped in secrecy. And all that unsinkable PR? That was cover. A distraction to hype the voyage and fatten the insurance payout when the accident happened. Let's start with the basics. White Star Line, owned by J.P. Morgan's International Mercantile Marine Company, had been bleeding money after the Olympics' collision with HMS Hawke in 1911. The repairs were massive, but the Olympic was too damaged to sail properly, and guess what? The insurance wouldn't cover the damages. They said the ship was at fault. That meant no payout. White Star was stuck with a billion-dollar bathtub, but the Titanic, brand new, sparkling, fully insured, and most importantly, worth far more dead than alive. Now imagine you're JP Morgan. You've got a twin ship no one can tell apart. One's a broken money pit, one's a golden ticket. You pull a switch, you sink the Olympic disguised as the Titanic. Boom, you get the payout. And what a payout it was. $4 million in 1912 money, over $120 million today. One of the biggest maritime insurance claims ever paid at the time. And Morgan? He dodged scandal, criminal charges, and any whiff of suspicion. But here's the kicker. This wasn't just about money. It was about power. The Titanic cleared the deck, literally, of Morgan's political enemies. The public was too distraught to notice the chessboard being rearranged. And just 1 year later, like clockwork, Congress passes the Federal Reserve Act in 1913. No opposition, no Astor, no Strauss, no Guggenheim, just Morgan's dream of a centralized bank, now a reality. A fake ship sinks, real billionaires die, Morgan cashes in, and the world gets a new banking overlord. Ask yourself, if this was just an accident, why does the financial fallout look more like a boardroom strategy session than a disaster recovery? Let's be blunt. The Titanic sank, but was it the Titanic that sank? Because what we've uncovered is more than suspicion. It's a trail of red flags, each one waving louder than the last. A sister ship with catastrophic damage. A mysterious switcheroo no one was supposed to notice. A last-minute passenger cancellation list that reads like a who's who of Illuminati-level planning. A wreck at the bottom of the ocean with wrong parts, wrong windows, and wrong ID numbers. A massive insurance payout that saved a corporation and maybe launched the Federal Reserve itself. And we're supposed to believe it was just an iceberg? Come on. The official story has more holes than the hull of the Olympic. It reeks of cover-up, sleight of hand, and elite orchestration. This wasn't just about sinking a ship. This was about eliminating opposition, resetting the financial game board, and distracting the masses with a tale of frozen tragedy while the real titans of industry rewrote history. Because once the world believed the myth became reality. They told us it was the unsinkable ship, but maybe the only thing they couldn't sink was the lie. History is written by the winners, but sometimes the winners are just better liars. So next time someone tells you the Titanic was just a tragic accident, ask them, which Titanic? The one that sailed or the one that sank? This has been Rock Solid TV, uncensored, unfiltered, unshakable. Stay sharp, stay awake, and whatever you do, don't board the ship without checking the name on the hull.